I need to get this down while I still remember it clearly, while I can still trust my own memory. Though honestly, I'm not sure I can trust anything anymore. My name is Alex, and until 3 days ago, I worked night security at Meridian Office Complex downtown. 12 floors of accounting firms, insurance companies, and law offices. The kind of place that's completely dead after 6 p.m., where the only sounds are the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional ping of an elevator nobody called. I'd been doing the job for about 8 months. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills while I figured out what to do with my life. My girlfriend Sarah had been pushing me to find something with better hours, something that wouldn't leave me sleeping all day and living like a vampire. But honestly, I liked the solitude. After spending 4 years in customer service, dealing with angry people all day, the quiet emptiness of those 12 floors felt like a sanctuary. The routine was simple. Clock in at 11 p.m., do an initial walkthrough of all floors, then settle in at the security desk in the lobby. Every 2 hours, I'd make another round, check the doors were locked, make sure no pipes were leaking, no windows broken, no homeless people had somehow gotten into sleep in the stairwells. Most nights, I'd just sit at the front desk reading paperbacks or watching Netflix on my phone with earbuds in. The building itself was built in 1987, all beige carpet and wood paneling that had probably looked sophisticated once but now just felt dated. During the day, it buzzed with activity, hundreds of people in suits rushing between meetings, elevator music playing, phones ringing constantly. But at night, it transformed into something else entirely. The same spaces that felt corporate and sterile during business hours became vast and hollow after dark, full of shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. The building had this old intercom system from when it was first constructed. Beige plastic speakers mounted in every hallway, connected to a master console at the security desk that looked like something from a 1980s sci-fi movie. All analog switches and dials, with a directory of room numbers written in faded ink on masking tape. Management never bothered updating it because, honestly, who needs an intercom in an empty building at 2 a.m.? That's why it took me so long to realize something was wrong. For the first 7 months, everything was perfectly normal. I'd developed a rhythm: arrive at 11, walk floors 1 through 6, then 7 through 12, back to the desk by midnight. Read for an hour, do another round at 2 a.m., return to the desk until 4, final round at 6, then wait for the day shift guy to arrive at 7. The most exciting thing that had ever happened was finding a broken window on the 4th floor after a storm and discovering that someone had left their office fish tank running over the weekend, flooding half the accounting department. But about 3 weeks ago, things started to change. It began with the intercom system acting up. I'd be sitting at the desk, reading or scrolling through my phone, when I'd hear these soft clicks coming from the speakers. Just little pops and bursts of static, like someone was testing microphones somewhere in the building. The first few times it happened, I figured it was just the old system malfunctioning. Buildings make weird noises, especially at night when they're settling and the temperature drops. I even called the building maintenance company the next day to report it. They said they'd look into it, but when I asked about it a week later, they claimed there was no record of my call. The day shift security guard, Mike, said he'd never heard anything unusual during his rounds, but then again, Mike was about 65 and half deaf from his years working construction. The clicks became more frequent over the next few days. Sometimes they'd happen in clusters like Morse code. Other times they'd be spread out over hours, just random pops of static that would make me look up from whatever I was doing. I started timing them, keeping a little notebook where I'd write down when they occurred and from which speaker. There didn't seem to be any pattern. Sometimes they'd come from the 3rd floor, sometimes the 9th, sometimes multiple floors at once. Then, about 2 weeks ago, I started hearing the breathing. It was so faint at first. I thought it might be my own breathing somehow getting picked up and echoed back through the speakers. You know how sometimes you hear your own voice on a recording and it sounds wrong? It was like that, but with breathing. Slow, steady inhales and exhales drifting through the intercom system. The first time I noticed it, I was doing my 2 a.m. rounds on the 8th floor. I'd stopped to check a conference room door when I heard it. This soft, rhythmic breathing coming from the speaker mounted on the wall next to me. I held my breath, thinking maybe I was somehow causing feedback through the system. But the breathing continued, steady and measured, like someone deep in sleep. I walked back to the security desk and pulled out the intercom manual, a thin, yellowed booklet that had been sitting in the desk drawer since I started. According to the manual, the system was designed to be activated only from the master console or from individual room stations. There was no way for it to pick up ambient sound unless someone was deliberately pressing a talk button. But that breathing kept drifting through the speakers night after night. I started carrying a small digital recorder I'd bought at an electronics store, thinking I needed to document this. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that the months of working alone in an empty building weren't making me paranoid. Here's the thing, though. When I played back the recording the next morning, there was nothing there. Just my footsteps echoing through empty hallways and the occasional creak of the building settling. No breathing, no static, nothing. I thought maybe the recorder wasn't sensitive enough, so I tried using my phone's voice memo app. Same result. I borrowed Sarah's more expensive recorder, the one she used for her journalism classes. Still nothing. But I could hear it every night, clear as day. That soft, measured breathing coming from different speakers throughout the building. Sometimes it would follow me as I walked the halls, jumping from speaker to speaker like it was tracking my movement. Other times, it would stay in one location, coming from the same floor for hours. I started mapping it, trying to figure out if there was a pattern. The breathing seemed to favor certain floors. The 5th, 7th, and 9th were the most common, but it never came from the executive floors, 10 through 12, which I found odd. Those were the floors with the nicest offices, the big corner suites with windows overlooking the city. By the 3rd week, I was barely sleeping during the day. Sarah noticed I was getting jumpy, paranoid. She'd ask me how work was going, and I'd find myself starting to tell her about the breathing, then stopping. How do you explain to someone that you're being haunted by an intercom system? How do you tell your girlfriend that an empty office building is watching you? I started researching the building's history, spending my days at the library going through old newspaper archives and city records. Meridian Office Complex had been built in 1987 by a development company that went bankrupt 2 years later. Before that, the lot had been empty for decades. Apparently there had been a small apartment building there in the 1950s that burned down, but nothing else significant. The building had changed hands several times over the years. Different management companies, different owners. But I couldn't find any reports of accidents, deaths, or unusual incidents. No reason why the place would be haunted, I guess. Though I wasn't even sure that's what this was. Then the breathing developed company. It started as whispers. Not words exactly, but the rhythm and cadence of conversation. Like when you hear people talking in the next room through thin walls, but you can't make out what they're saying. The whispers would start around 1 a.m. and continue until about 4, overlapping with the breathing but distinct from it. At first, I thought maybe it was coming from outside, late-night pedestrians walking past the building, their voices somehow getting picked up by the intercom system. But when I checked the windows, the streets were always empty. Downtown was dead after midnight, especially on weekdays. The whispers were different from the breathing. They seemed more intentional, like the breathing was automatic, involuntary, but the whispers were deliberate communication. I started hearing what sounded like names sometimes, though I could never make them out clearly. Sarah, Mike, Alex. My name seemed to come up a lot. I called my supervisor, Jim, after the first week of whispers. Jim was a good guy, former cop who'd moved into private security after retiring from the force. He'd hired me because I was reliable and didn't ask too many questions about the boring nature of the work. "Jim," I said, "I need to talk to you about something weird happening at the Meridian building." He laughed before I even finished explaining. "Old building, Alex. Probably just the HVAC system or something making noise through the vents. You know how these places are. They settle and creak and make all kinds of sounds at night. As long as nobody's actually in there causing trouble, don't worry about it." "But Jim, it's not just random noise. It sounds like breathing, like people talking, and it's coming through the intercom system, not the vents." "Son, you've been working nights for 8 months. Sometimes isolation can play tricks on your mind. Why don't you take a long weekend, get some rest, come back Monday fresh?" I wanted to argue, but what could I say? That I was hearing voices? That an empty building was talking to me? I'd sound crazy. Hell, maybe I was going crazy. But I didn't take the weekend off. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I left, if I abandoned my post, something would happen. The building needed me there. The voices needed me to hear them. That's when I started staying awake all night, really listening. Not just doing my rounds and killing time between them, but actively trying to understand what was happening. I'd sit at the security desk with my notebook, writing down every sound, every whisper, every breath. I timed them, tried to find patterns, attempted to make sense of the rhythm. The breathing was always the same, slow, steady, like someone in deep sleep. But the whispers varied. Sometimes they were urgent, rapid-fire conversations that seemed to move through the building like a wave. Other times they were drawn out, contemplative, like people discussing something important. I started recognizing what sounded like different voices. There was a woman's voice that seemed to come from the 5th floor, always soft and sad. A man's voice from the 7th floor that sounded angry, frustrated. And something from the 9th floor that I couldn't quite identify. It might have been a child, or maybe just a very quiet adult. 3 weeks in, I thought I heard my name clearly for the first time. I was doing my 4 a.m. rounds, walking past the elevator bank on the 6th floor, when the speaker crackled and I heard, "Alex needs to know." I stopped dead in my tracks. The hallway was empty, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the pale light filtering in from the street. I waited, holding my breath, but there was nothing else. Just the faint hum of the building's electrical systems. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish even as I did it. "Is someone there?" Nothing. I tried the intercom system that night, pressing the talk button and speaking into the microphone at the security desk. "If anyone can hear this, I'm listening. I'm trying to understand what you want." For a moment, there was only silence. Then every speaker in the building came alive at once with what sounded like dozens of voices all talking over each other. It was overwhelming, a cacophony of whispers and breathing and sounds that might have been crying or laughing. I couldn't tell which. I yanked my hand away from the talk button, and everything went quiet again. That's when I started to realize I wasn't just hearing random sounds. Something in the building was trying to communicate with me. The next night, I brought a better recorder, a professional-grade device I'd borrowed from Sarah without telling her. I also brought a laptop and some audio editing software, thinking maybe I could isolate the voices, clean up the recordings, figure out what they were trying to say. But again, when I played back the recordings, there was nothing there. Hours of silence broken only by my own footsteps and voice. It was like the building was actively avoiding being recorded, like it knew when I was trying to document what was happening. That's when I started to get really scared. Not just confused or curious, but genuinely frightened. Because if the voices were in my head, if I was having some kind of breakdown, then at least that was something I could address. I could get help, see a doctor, take medication. But if the building was somehow selectively making itself heard only to me, only when I wasn't recording, that was something else entirely. I started researching audio hallucinations, sleep deprivation, the psychological effects of isolation. I read about night shift workers who developed paranoid delusions, security guards who started seeing things that weren't there. The symptoms seemed to match what I was experiencing, but the knowledge didn't make the voices go away. If anything, they were getting stronger. Last Thursday night, everything changed. I was doing my 2 a.m. rounds, walking past the elevator bank on the 7th floor, when the intercom crackled to life with perfect clarity, and I heard my own voice say, "Is anyone there? Hello?" I stopped walking. I hadn't said anything. I was just standing there in the hallway, listening to my own voice echo through the speakers. But it continued. "I think someone's in the building with me. I can hear them breathing, whispering. I don't know what they want." I recognized the words. They were things I'd said during my phone call with Jim weeks earlier, when I'd first tried to explain what was happening. But how could the intercom system have recorded that? I'd been at home when I made that call. The playback continued. "I'm scared, Jim. I don't think I'm alone in here. I think something's been watching me, listening to me this whole time." That's when I realized what I was hearing. It wasn't just my voice. It was a conversation I'd never had, constructed from fragments of things I'd said over the past few weeks. Like someone had been recording me, piecing together my words to create new sentences, new confessions. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when my recorded voice said, "I'm going to check the 9th floor now. If anyone's listening to this, I'm heading up to 9 right now. I'll be in conference room 9B. I had never said that. I had never announced my location over the intercom. I'd never even been in conference room 9B. It was always locked, and I didn't have a key for individual offices, only for the main floor access doors. But as my own voice continued to narrate my supposed movements, I felt a compulsion to follow the script, like I was being directed in a play I didn't remember auditioning for. I found myself walking to the stairwell, climbing to the 9th floor. The door to conference room 9B was standing open, even though I knew it had been locked every other time I'd passed it. Inside, the lights were on, and there was a single chair facing a wall-mounted speaker. I sat down. For the next hour, I listened to my own voice having a conversation with people who weren't there. I heard myself discussing my childhood, my relationship with Sarah, my fears about the future. I heard myself reveal things I'd never told anyone, secrets I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten them myself. And worst of all, I heard myself agreeing to things, making promises, accepting responsibilities I didn't understand. Yes, I'll make sure no one else finds out. I understand what needs to be done. I won't let anyone else work this shift. The building is safe with me. I sat there paralyzed, listening to my own voice commit to things I'd never agreed to. When it finally stopped, I ran for the stairs. But as I reached the stairwell door, every speaker in the building came alive at once. A dozen versions of my own voice, all talking over each other. He's running now. Stairwell heading down. Don't let him leave. We know where he lives. Sarah won't understand. Check his car tonight. He belongs here now. This is his home. I made it to the parking garage and sat in my car for an hour before I could stop shaking enough to drive. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I kept looking in my rearview mirror, expecting to see someone following me, but the garage was empty. I called in sick the next day and the day after that. I couldn't bear the thought of going back to that building, of hearing my own voice twisted into words I'd never spoken. Sarah was worried about me. I was jumpy, paranoid, starting at every sound. I told her I was coming down with something, that I just needed a few days to rest. But I couldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those voices. My voice primarily, but also the others, the woman from the 5th floor, the angry man from the 7th, the quiet presence from the 9th. They were all talking about me now, discussing what I'd learned, what I'd agreed to, what I was supposed to do next. Yesterday, Jim called to tell me they were letting me go for abandoning my post. He sounded genuinely sorry about it, said I'd been a good employee, but that they couldn't have security guards just disappearing without explanation. The weird thing is, he said, we reviewed the security footage from Thursday night, trying to figure out what happened to you. And according to the cameras, you never left the front desk. You just sat there the entire shift, not moving, not doing your rounds, like you were in some kind of trance. That's impossible, I said. I walked every floor that night. I was in conference room 9B for over an hour. Alex, son, I'm looking at the footage right now. You're sitting at the security desk from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. barely moving. The timestamp shows you never got up, not even to use the bathroom. Are you sure you're feeling all right? I hung up without answering, because I knew what I'd experienced. I knew where I'd been, what I'd heard, what I'd seen. But if the cameras showed something different, the really messed up part? This morning I found a package on my doorstep. No return address, no delivery confirmation. Inside was a voice recorder, not one of mine, but an expensive professional model. When I played it back, I heard 8 hours of my own voice having conversations with people who weren't there. But these weren't fragments pieced together from things I'd said before. These were new conversations, recorded Thursday night while I was supposedly sitting motionless at the security desk. I heard myself discussing the building's history, talking about previous security guards who'd worked there and quit suddenly. I heard myself making plans to ensure the building's residents were protected, promising to discourage anyone else from taking the night shift. Most disturbing of all, I heard myself talking about Sarah, about how she wouldn't understand, how she might try to interfere, how she was better off not knowing about my real responsibilities. I've been listening to this recording over and over, and it's definitely my voice. Not just similar. It's exactly my voice, my speech patterns, my mannerisms. But I don't remember having any of these conversations. I don't remember agreeing to any of these things. I'm leaving town tonight. I've already packed my car, told Sarah I got a job offer in another state that I can't pass up. She's hurt, confused, but she's not trying to stop me. Maybe she can sense that something's wrong, that I'm not quite the same person I was a week ago. I don't know what that building was doing to me, or what it recorded while I thought I was just doing my job, but I keep hearing Jim's words. According to the cameras, you never left the front desk. What if I didn't? What if I sat there all night while some other version of myself walked the halls, talked to the voices, made agreements I don't remember? What if someone else was wearing my face, using my voice, living my life while I was trapped in some kind of loop at that security desk? And here's the thought that keeps me awake. If they can make me sit motionless for 8 hours while something else walks around in my body, what else can they do? How long have they been doing it? How many of my memories are real, and how many are just recordings played back to keep me docile? I'm driving west, getting as far from that building as I can, but I can't shake the feeling that it doesn't matter where I go, because the voices aren't just in the building anymore. They're in my head, they're in that recording, and every time I hear my own voice saying things I don't remember, I wonder, what if I'm still there? What if I never left that desk, and everything since Thursday night has been just another recording, another loop designed to keep me calm while they use my body for whatever they need? What if I'm still sitting there right now, staring at nothing, while something else types these words with my hands? What if I never left at all?